Right, so Anthony Joshua's recently done an interview out in Nigeria, where I believe he's on holiday, where he has spoken about his plans to continue his boxing career and his desire to face Tyson Fury in 2025.
Time is of the essence. Time is limited, so I just want to put in more work. 2024, when I look back, I believe I could have done more. I should have won, but I didn't, and I'm going to go again. Ups and downs, they happen. Some people is always up. My life is up and down. I can't stop now. I have to keep going until I reach my destination. Three-time world champion. And Tyson Fury. 2025, I'm targeting Tyson Fury.
Now, this is definitely the news that we as boxing fans wanted to hear. Anthony Joshua against Tyson Fury is a fight that we have long since wanted, and the appetite for that fight has not been suppressed, in my opinion. However, you may well disagree with that, and at the moment, we haven't even heard from Tyson Fury, so we don't know whether he plans to continue his boxing career or whether he plans to hang up the gloves. Now, AJ speaks about becoming a three-time world champion, and it's brilliant. I really like the desire that he's showing in that interview, but what I would like to know is, what is your path to getting yourself to that third world title? Because if the heavyweight landscape stays the same as it is at the moment, then you only have two champions, one of which you suffered back-to-back one-sided, I would say, defeats in to Oleksandr Usyk, and the other being a man who has just knocked you out in Daniel Dubois, and it's pretty well known that you've passed up the opportunity to face in an immediate rematch. And just quickly, before you lot assume that that's me sticking the knife in here, I'm not. I don't write off the possibility that Anthony Joshua could beat Daniel Dubois in a rematch. Usyk, no chance, but Daniel Dubois, I mean, listen, they're two big men. They've both been beaten, they've both been stopped, and they both hold immense power. And therefore, although I would back Daniel Dubois to win that rematch, I'm not someone that necessarily thinks that rematches will always go in the same way as the first fight. I'm definitely not someone who writes a fighter off after they suffer a couple of losses. I mean, Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker, his next opponent for that matter, are two prime examples of why you shouldn't write a fighter off. They are both in the form of their life after a lot of people had thought that maybe they wouldn't go on to achieve anywhere near what they have done. Because losing a couple of fights does not define you. It's how you come back from losing those fights. And it happens so much more than people would actually realize. There's so many more guys that I could give you than just the obvious examples. Lee Wood, for example, right? He lost to Gavin McDonnell and he lost to, I should know this, who did he lose to? Jazza Dickens, right? And then he went on a run which included wins over the likes of Kanju, Michael Conlon, Josh Warrington, Lara, picking up world titles along the way. So it can happen, you know. Bernard Hopkins, he lost his first ever fight. Then he lost to Roy Jones Jr. Then he had back-to-back losses to Jermaine Taylor. Then a couple of fights later, he lost to Joe Calzaghe. And then he went on to win the world title. Carl Froch was always in wars that a lot of people assumed would put many, many miles on the clock. He loses to Mikkel Kessler. He goes into the Super 6 boxing series and in most people's opinion loses to Andre Durrell. He gets to the final and he loses to Andre Ward. And at that time, many people are ready to write the Cobra off. But what does he do? He immediately takes a danger fight in unbeaten Lucian Butte and he absolutely blitzes him and comes back on a successful world title run. So what I'm constantly trying to tell you lot is, it happens. Fighters can come back when you think they're done, when you think they're washed up, and they can then have successful runs, upset victories, and have a heyday to the end of their career. So to write off a fighter like Anthony Joshua would be stupid. But here's where I will contradict myself. Not only is AJ a physical specimen, a real athlete, but I also believe that he is an elite student. I think he is very, very good at taking on board the coach's advice, the coach's strategy, adapting to that and learning from the coaches that he's working with. But when the coach walks out the ring and it's just AJ in there, I do think that he struggles in fights that aren't going his way. And struggling in boxing and in life in general is completely normal. So please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying that AJ can't come through fights that he does struggle in. We've seen him do it in his career. He struggled against Dillian White and came through. He struggled against Klitschko and came through. Povetkin, I would even say he struggled against Jermaine Franklin and came through. But I've also seen him look very, very lost in fights before, like the fight with Andy Ruiz Jr. and like the 2 fights with Oleksandr Usyk. And when we saw him come back after those Usyk defeats, I don't think that anyone can deny that Anthony Joshua did look majorly gun-shy in comparison to the old AJ. And that mental fragility, or at least what I perceive as being a mental fragility, does worry me with Anthony Joshua. I feel like he knows that at heavyweight, his chin is average. Not bad, average. But to stand at the top of the heavyweight division, I think that you need a really, really good chin. And when AJ gets hit clean, that uncertainty of his ability to take a shot and to ride the storm and recover is something that I feel hinders him massively. And you notice I mentioned Andy Ruiz Jr. there and Oleksandr Usyk, and I didn't actually speak about the defeat to Daniel Dubois. And the reason for that is I have to give Anthony Joshua huge, huge credit for the amount of bollocks he showed in that Daniel Dubois fight and the amount of desire he showed and belief that he could still pull something out the bag. I honestly don't feel like that right hand that dropped Anthony Joshua early on gets spoken about enough, because I think if that right hand hits so many top 10 heavyweights, they don't beat the count for that one. So for Joshua to keep trying after multiple crisis moments, to keep battling on and to have the guts to go for it when he smelt blood, as ironic as it is something that I have to really, really applaud. And if you take away the context of Anthony Joshua being the favourite in that fight, and you actually just flip it, you could look at it and you could say, he came up against Daniel Dubois, a younger man, a hungrier man on a better run of form, who is known to be one of the hardest hitters in the heavyweight division. And if you look at it like that, then you have to admit that AJ showed massive resilience and he showed a progression in his mentality from what we've seen before, to be able to stay in there and to fire back until he was put out of his misery. So if he's got the ambition to come back in a huge British showdown with Tyson Fury off the back of the spirit that I believe he showed in the Daniel Dubois fight, then I cannot doubt Anthony Joshua's courage. But what I do doubt is Anthony Joshua's chin and Anthony Joshua's powers of recovery when it comes to high-level heavyweight boxing. In a nutshell, when AJ gets hit, he stays hit. Whereas you look at Tyson Fury, for example, and he's honestly just a freak of nature, mate. His recovery powers are ridiculous. And there was a lot of narrative going into that second Usyk fight. And I would say even after maybe the Wilder trilogy of, has Tyson Fury's powers of recovery diminished a little bit? Is his chin not as good as it used to be? But I've got to look at that Oleksandr Usyk fight. Listen, I was watching it live. I didn't really see any crisis moments for Tyson Fury in that fight. I saw similar shots land on Tyson Fury to what had landed in the first fight, and I didn't see it have the same effect. And maybe that's to do with the extra added weight, but what I'm saying is, until I can visibly see a notable decline in Tyson Fury's chin or powers of recovery, I'm not really going to question it. And when we speak about the chin itself, the chin and the powers of recovery are two completely different things, because Tyson Fury's never had the greatest chin. He's been dropped about 10 times, hasn't he? It's the powers of recovery, the ability to be able to get yourself back up off the canvas and not only survive, but compete. That is what Tyson Fury definitively has over Anthony Joshua. And I'm not saying those powers of recovery haven't waned a tiny bit, but they haven't just gone like that overnight. Look at the first Usyk fight, and that will show you that. I honestly believe that Fury was more hurt in that first Usyk fight than he was when he was dropped against Wilder, any of those times, or at any other point during his career. And not only did he manage to see out the round, whether or not you agree or think that the ref should have jumped in and stopped it, which I don't, by the way. It's a unification heavyweight world title fight, first time in 20 years. You've at least got to let the man go down. However, whether you agree with that or not, Tyson Fury continued in that fight. And for me, he won one more round after that, which shows that he's able to recoup, he's able to regain, and able to get his head back in fights. Now, what with Anthony Joshua coming off the loss to Daniel Dubois and Tyson Fury coming off back-to-back losses to Oleksandr Usyk, you may well see this as sort of last chance saloon to make this fight. Will Tyson Fury be up for making this fight, though? That's the real question, because we all saw his reaction to both defeats, to be fair, to Oleksandr Usyk, but specifically the one just gone, and obviously it did look like Tyson Fury had taken that one quite hard. He claimed he was robbed when I felt the decision was fair. I felt that maybe it was one round wider than I'd have scored it on the scorecards, but nevertheless, I think a unanimous decision win to Oleksandr Usyk was without doubt the right call. And with a character like Tyson Fury, I always worry that this could be the spiral moment where he starts to lose control a little bit and starts to slip into some of the depressive ways that he has done in the past. In fact, as I think about it, that's probably one of AJ's biggest advantages in this fight, because Joshua has proven that he can come back from defeats. And as much as Tyson Fury has sort of done that in terms of he definitely wasn't hurt anywhere near as bad in the second fight with Usyk, and maybe some would say it was closer on the scorecards than the first fight with Oleksandr Usyk, Anthony Joshua has definitely shown the ability to come back from losses more times than Tyson Fury has had to. And again, you could quite easily counter that with Anthony Joshua's been beaten more times than Tyson Fury has. But for me, I do still think that it's not just about money. I do still think that there's a degree of legacy and respect that Tyson Fury can get out of this fight. And when we look at eras of boxing, right, we often label them by decade, in my opinion. So let's say, for example, Mike Tyson, he was the man of the 80s. Lennox Lewis was the man of the 90s. The Klitschko's, probably Vladimir, really was the man of the 2000s. And for me, Tyson Fury was the man of the 2010s. And before you get in the comments and come for me, that is not me saying that Tyson Fury is better than Oleksandr Usyk. Usyk is the man at heavyweight of the 2020s, and he'd probably beat all of the men in the decade before him. But you can't call Oleksandr Usyk the man of the 2010s, can you? Because during the 2010s, he only had his first heavyweight fight in 2019 when he beat Chaz Witherspoon, and then I think it was at the end of 2020 when he beat Derek Chisora. And by that logic, it's why we don't call Lennox Lewis the man of the 2000s. We'd call him the man of the 90s, but not the 2000s. However, in the 2000s, he beat Ratman, he beat Mike Tyson, and he beat Vitaly Klitschko. But due to the fact of only boxing for sort of 3 years in that decade, and his best, his prime, coming in the decade before, that's why I'd label him the man of the 90s. Whereas Vladimir Klitschko won multiple world titles during that decade and had 14, 15 title defenses during that decade. But I am going somewhere with this point, so stay with me, because with the 2010s, it's a little bit more complicated, isn't it? Obviously, the standout win for me is Tyson Fury going over to Dusseldorf against all odds and dethroning Vladimir Klitschko, who was 11 years unbeaten at the time. But some would argue that the 3-year hiatus that took place after that, in which Anthony Joshua was picking up world titles and defending world titles, could give Anthony Joshua a claim to being the man of the 2010s, really. For me, Joshua's best wins, the best standout wins, don't match up to the best wins of Tyson Fury's, in my opinion. I think that styles make fights, and although you can say, well, he got the stoppage over Vladimir Klitschko landed more punches on Anthony Joshua in 2 or 3 rounds than he did on Tyson Fury in 12 rounds. Tyson Fury's win over Vladimir Klitschko, I felt, was a lot more dominant, although the ending for Anthony Joshua was a lot more conclusive. But the main difference is Vladimir Klitschko was 11 years unbeaten and 2.5 years younger when Tyson Fury fought him, as opposed to 41 odd years old, I think it was, when Anthony Joshua fought him, and coming off the back of a loss. And not only that, you look at Vladimir Klitschko, right? He was unbeaten from before Anthony Joshua had picked up a pair of boxing gloves. So for Tyson Fury to go over to his backyard and beat him, in my opinion, is more impressive than what AJ did at Wembley Stadium. And another one that we've got to speak about here is Tyson Fury dethroning Deontay Wilder. And there's so much negativity put on Deontay Wilder's name now. And I'm not a Deontay Wilder fan, but it really does annoy me to an extent, you know. Wilder is a fighter that I will put my neck out on the line now and say I feel is washed up. I've literally stood a couple of feet away from him and the presence, the aura, everything is gone. But it wasn't when he was on that 34 fight winning streak and Tyson Fury took him on. What he was technically and fundamentally a hazard. He was awful, really, Deontay Wilder. But there has been heavyweights in the history of boxing that also were very technically flawed. But what Deontay Wilder had was tremendous punch power. And the fact that he was so far advanced in that one ability made up for so many of his other flaws. I believe the version of Deontay Wilder that went into the first Fury fight would have probably beat the version of Joseph Parker that Anthony Joshua beat for the world title. I believe that he'd have probably beat the version of Povetkin that Anthony Joshua beat. I don't know whether it'd beat that version of Klitschko. In fact, I think I'd make Klitschko a favourite in that one. But either way, I think that version of Deontay Wilder is underrated. And as I say, the aura hadn't gone around Wilder by that point. And now the aura and the hype around him has gone, and we've seen him exposed in his later years. I understand that people are ready to say, oh, well, he was never any good, but that's just not how boxing works. I'm trying to tell you like this all the time. And I honestly don't think that because of him being a shadow of himself now, we just completely write off the fact that Fury went over to America and, in my opinion, beat Wilder 3 times conclusively. For me, that's legacy defining. And say what you want about the era and about how you perceive the quality of that era, but what you can't deny is that, in my opinion, Tyson Fury's major achievements surpass Anthony Joshua's. But the reason that this is an interesting one, and one that there is a lot of room for debating, is because of the fact that when it comes to fighting top 10, top 15 heavyweights, Anthony Joshua's resume has way more depth than Tyson Fury's. I suppose what I'm trying to say is they were both great during that time. They are both great still now, but for me, Tyson Fury showed up more in the bigger fights than Anthony Joshua did. And despite this now being at the tail end of each of their careers, this whole media bullshit that I'm hearing about people shouldn't be bothered because it's past its prime and it's not the best against the best anymore is just a load of bollocks, mate. Like, if we had have finished the 90s era, right, Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson had have retired and neither of them had have fought each other, we would have felt so shortchanged. Like, I'm honestly telling you, we would have always looked back and thought, oh, what if them two had have fought? And ultimately, we don't have to do that because they did fight. But what some of you may know and what maybe younger viewers might not know is they were both past it. They were both past their best at that time when they fought, but we still got the fight. And for me, that is what matters. This fight sells out Wembley Stadium in a matter of minutes. Put it on pay-per-view on the same night as, let's say, Usyk against Daniel Dubois, and I guarantee you this one outperforms that fight. The purists won't like this, but let me give you a news flash here. The money in boxing doesn't come down solely to skill. The money in boxing comes down to interest. And it's probably no shock to you lot here, but I will be backing Tyson Fury to win this fight as and when it happens. I just think that Tyson Fury is mentally stronger once inside the ropes than Anthony Joshua is. Not only that, I feel he's a better boxer. I feel he's got a better jab than Anthony Joshua, and if he is to win that jab exchange, then I think that will serve him well. I've got no doubt that maybe Joshua will have a more powerful jab than Tyson Fury, but Fury's jab will land with a lot more consistency. And I think that Tyson Fury will now thrive off of the fact that he's spent really a couple of years preparing for a tricky, small southpaw that there's always the opportunity that you're going to miss so many punches against and it's going to be really hard to hit. Then all of a sudden, you are going in there with a big, orthodox man who, yes, carries a lot of power and has certain attributes that even Usyk doesn't, but he is going to be so much easier to land on than Oleksandr Usyk. But then this is why I find it fascinating, because Anthony Joshua has Ben Davison in his corner, Tyson Fury's old trainer, the trainer that brought him back from the depths of depression and helped formulate that comeback for Tyson Fury. And not only does he know Tyson Fury's strengths, most importantly, he knows Tyson Fury's weaknesses that may have never been exposed to the public's eyes, weaknesses that may have only cropped up in sparring that he would have seen and would have first-hand knowledge of, and therefore maybe he will be able to formulate a perfect game plan for Anthony Joshua to beat Tyson Fury. But then I circle it back to the start of the video when I said that although Anthony Joshua is a great student, he can very much struggle to carry out those tactics once he's in the ring. And if I look at the last few performances of each, I don't really rate an AJ performance since his losses to Oleksandr Usyk. I think his probably best performance, when you take into account how good he is the rematch against Oleksandr Usyk. I thought AJ did well in that and closed the gap that was there from the first fight, albeit losing convincingly still. But when you look at the performances to Otto Wallin and against Francis Ngannou, great spectacles, but at the same time, just how good are those wins, you know? Otto Wallin was a man that Anthony Joshua had boxed as an amateur, I think once or twice, you know? He was a man that he employed as a sparring partner for the Charles Martin fight, and I think again for the Usyk fight. And with Francis Ngannou, he was less of an unknown quantity than he was when Tyson Fury faced him. However, I do have to give it to Anthony Joshua. He absolutely demolished Ngannou, and that was not something that Tyson Fury was able to do. But if we go on last time out, AJ got starched, and Tyson Fury looked well and did well, in my opinion, albeit not well enough against a man who has a claim to be in the pound-for-pound #1 in boxing right now. It's actually really ironic, isn't it, due to the life that Tyson Fury has led, the story that we all know about of alcohol, drugs, weight gain and whatnot. But actually, in comparison to the chiseled athlete in Anthony Joshua, who definitely does live the life, I think that Tyson Fury's aging better than Anthony Joshua is. I was shocked in that Usyk rematch when I looked at Tyson Fury, because although he was beat, I kind of looked at him and thought, before tonight, I thought that this was possibly your last fight. And after tonight, I think you've got 3 or 4 more left in you. So therefore, I would be picking that version of Tyson Fury that fought Oleksandr Usyk last month to beat this version of Anthony Joshua. Possibly on points, probably on points, possibly by a late stoppage. But I'm very, very interested to hear your guys' thoughts. You may well disagree with me. You may believe that I'm wrong on this and Anthony Joshua might blast through Tyson Fury. I'm really interested to read the comment sections of this one. Please do me a massive favour, by the way, guys. I never end up remembering to ask on this channel because I always just assume, you know, if you like the content, you'll probably subscribe either way. But I know a lot of you, it does slip your mind. So please, please, please subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps me out. Hit a like on this video right now, and I will see you all in the next one.